Chapter 7 Princess of the Bastille. There is one truly nice thing about being a prisoner of the Bastille, Sara thought as she gazed out her attic window at the evening sky. I have the only room in the whole seminary to have such a splendid view of London sunsets. When the light began to glow in a mysterious way in the square, Sara knew that something wonderful was going on in the sky above. When it was at all possible to leave the kitchen without being missed or called back, she crept away and up the flights of stairs to her attic room. Climbing on the old table, Sara would open the skylight and stick her head and body out as far the window as possible. Then she would take a deep breath and look all around her. She had the sky and the entire top of the world to herself. No one else ever looked out of the other attic windows, as far as Sara could tell. Quite alone at her window, Sara would stand, sometimes turning her face upward to the blue sky, which seemed so friendly and near. Sometimes she watched the west and all the wonderful things that happened there, the clouds drifting, waiting to be softly painted pink or red or purple or pale dove gray. There were places in the clouds where it seemed that Sara could run or climb or stand and wait to see what else was coming, until it all melted and she could float back down to earth. Nothing had ever seemed quite so beautiful to Sara as the things she saw as she stood on the table, her body half out the skylight, the sparrows twittering with sunset softness on the roof tile slates around her. There was a spectacular sunset a few days after the English gentleman back from India and his manservant had moved in next door. Sara had finished her afternoon's work in the kitchen, so she was able to slip away and head upstairs. She got up on her table and stood looking west. It was a wonderful moment. There were floods of liquid gold covering the western sky, as if a glorious tide had swept over the world. A deep, rich yellow light filled the air. The birds flying across the tops of London's houses showed quite black against the skyline. "It is a splendid one," Sara said softly to herself. "It makes me feel almost afraid, as if something strange were going to happen. The splendid ones always make me feel that way." Sara turned her head as she heard a sound a few yards away, in the direction of the townhouse next door. It was an odd sound, like a queer little squeaky chattering. It came from the window of the next attic. Someone had finally come to look at the sunset, as she was doing. A head emerged from the skylight next door, the white turbaned head of a native of India. The squeaky sound Sara heard came from a small monkey that peeked up out of the window a few seconds later. The first thing Sara thought was that this man looked homesick. She felt sure he had come up to the roof to look at the sun, because he had seen the sun so seldom in England that he really missed the light and warmth it had provided in India. Sara smiled and waved from across the slate tiles of the roof. She had learned how comforting even a mere polite nod or smile could be. The friendly look in Sara's eyes was always effective when people felt tired or dully depressed. The manservant's whole expression changed as he smiled back. It was as if the light had suddenly shone full upon his face and gleamed from his perfect white teeth. As he waved a return greeting, the monkey he was holding slipped from his arms and jumped onto the slates. He rested there for a moment and then jumped into Sara's room. Sara laughed delightedly at the monkey's playfulness, but she realized that it might be difficult to catch this creature. She spoke to the man from India in his native language, glad that she was able to remember some of the Hindustani she had learned when she was very young. "Excuse me, sir, but do you think your monkey will let me catch him so that I can return him to you?" Sara asked in Hindustani. Delighted at the sound of the language he understood best, the man quickly introduced himself. First, he complimented Sara on her ability to speak his language so well and so prettily. His name was Ram Das. He was the servant of the English gentleman who was ill. The monkey was a good monkey and would not bite, but he would be difficult to catch. This monkey was disobedient and would run from the young lady, and he could jump like lightning. Ram Das knew him as if he were his child. The monkey would sometimes obey Ram Das, but not always. If the young lady would permit it, Ram Das would cross the roof to her room, where he could enter the window and capture the unworthy little animal. "Are you able to get across the roof?" Sara asked. Ram Das nodded, smiling broadly. "Then come," she said. "Your poor monkey is flying from side to side in my room, as if he is frightened. Oh, and please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Sara." Ramdas crossed the terrace as steadily and as speedily as if he had walked 90 feet off the ground all his life. Once inside, he bowed to Sara formally. The monkey cried out soon as he saw his owner. It was not a very long chase. The monkey prolonged it for a few minutes, simply for the fun of it, but eventually jumped onto Ramdas's shoulder and sat there, clinging to his neck with his weird, skinny arms. Ramdas thanked Sara again for her kindness. She had seen his quick eyes take in at a glance all the bare shabbiness of her room, but he spoke to her as if he were speaking to the daughter of an Indian prince. "This little evil one," he said, stroking the monkey, "is not as evil as he might seem. My master, the English gentleman, is sometimes amused by him. He might perhaps have become even more sad and depressed if his favorite pet animal had run away and gotten lost." Ramdas bowed to Sara once more in gratitude and left through the skylight with as much grace and physical agility as the monkey himself had displayed. Once her visitors had departed, Sara stood in the middle of her room and thought of the past. It seemed a strange thing to remember that she, the drudge to whom the cook had said insulting things an hour before, had once been surrounded by people who all treated her as respectfully as Ramdas had treated her. The past was sort of like a dream. It was all over, and it could never come back. It certainly seemed that way. But there was no way. It certainly seemed that there was no way in which change for the better could take place. Sara stood quite still for several minutes, thinking over her future. Then a thought came that made the color rise in her cheeks and a spark light in her eyes. She straightened her thin little body and lifted her head. "Whatever comes," she said defiantly, "it cannot alter one thing. I may not look like a princess, dressed in rags and tatters, but I can still remain a princess inside. It would be easy to be a princess if I were dressed in cloth of gold, but a greater triumph lies in remaining kind and generous and noble toward those who see me only in my rags and tatters. I will not stoop to being rude to those who are unkind or vulgar, because they do not know any better. A princess must remain polite at all times. She must not become mean-spirited like others around her." After reminding herself of her true inner identity, the princess of the Bastille went back downstairs, when the servants, taking their tone from Miss Minchin, ordered her about. Sara held her head up and replied so politely that it made them stare at her in amazed confusion. During the final rush to get dinner ready that evening, even the cook was forced to admit to the principal housemaid, "That girl Sara? She's got more airs and graces than if she'd come from Buckingham Palace. I lose my temper often enough, I know, but I have to admit that Sara never forgets her manners, even when I do. If you please, cook. Will you be so kind, cook? I beg your pardon, cook. May I trouble you, cook? Why, she drops polite speeches around the kitchen as if they were second nature to her."